Come here, Daniel, look at this. I called my husband in a panic. All the fruits we had grown with care were stolen. Seeing us depressed, let's teach the thief a lesson. Our son grinned and said, My name is Patricia, 44 years old. I live with my husband, Daniel, and our son, Donald, who is in grade 9. I used to work as an office worker in the city, but now we run a fruit orchard in the countryside. We took over my father-in-law's fruit orchard when he fell ill 20 years ago. Since my mother-in-law had passed away before Daniel and I got married, there was no one else to inherit the orchard. We grow various fruits seasonally, with muscat grapes being our main focus. Our orchard is quite large and surrounded by residential areas. There were many other orchards 20 years ago, but now they are gone and there are rows of condominiums instead. With the aging of farmers and a shortage of successors, many orchards couldn't be maintained, and developers seized the opportunity to turn this area into a commuter town for those who work in the city since the express train stopped at the nearby station. As a result, neighboring farmers quickly sold their orchard lands for a pittance, and the landscape of our town underwent a drastic change. Massive apartment buildings sprang up one after another. While we used to have close-knit relationships with our neighbors and deep community ties, nowadays, we only interact with a few people. Although we aren't the landlords, perhaps we have a spacious land. The chairman of the union for the newly built condo close to our orchard came to introduce himself. The chairman, a man named Paul, said, I'll make sure to remind the condo residents not to cause any inconvenience to those who have been living here for years. His reassuring words eased our concerns about potential safety issues resulting from the influx of new residents. However, those concerns came true. Patricia, the muscat grapes are missing again, Daniel reported with a sigh as he returned from the morning harvest. What? Again? I exclaimed. Yeah, it's strange. There are hardly any animals around here anymore, so I can only think a thief took them. Daniel said, looking downcast. It's kind of disturbing, but I guess we have no choice but to install security cameras. I suggested. Lately, our muscat grapes, just before harvest, had been stolen repeatedly. However, installing security cameras would require an investment in equipment and might create an unwelcoming atmosphere. So, as an initial measure, we decided to put up a sign. We will report fruit thieves to the police immediately. The sign was clear, but whether the thief hadn't seen it, or was ignoring it, there was no sign of the theft stopping. It's not like we've suffered massive losses yet. Setting up cameras to cover every angle would be expensive, and it might put us in the red. But if the losses keep increasing, we'll have to consider it. Daniel contemplated, crossing his arms. We thought about contacting the police, but even if we did, they wouldn't patrol daily. Even if they patrol the area, the police won't do anything, unless they find solid evidence or catch them red-handed. That's when our son, Donald, who had been listening to our conversation, spoke up. It's terrible that someone is stealing the things you both work so hard to grow. If we just let it go, I bet they'll get a taste of it and steal more. If you don't want to install cameras, I'll keep watch 24/7. Donald was a truly good kid. Among the children in the condo, some had a menacing demeanor, and there were a few who seemed sleazy. Donald, on the other hand, was nothing like those kids, and he was a good old country boy. He was born and raised in this town his entire life and had a strong sense of justice, loving his hometown and his family. Every time I saw Donald display his sense of justice like this, it reminded me of when he was a small child. He was never a fan of fruit, and even when he was in daycare, he never ate any of the fruit offered at daycare. It didn't make sense that the son of fruit orchard would dislike fruit, so we put a lot of effort into trying to make him like it. Then, one day, when we gave him a muscat grape we had harvested, he ate it with skin and all and said, "Oh, it's delicious." From that day on, Donald started eating all kinds of fruit, and before we knew it, he was eating various foods, including vegetables, with gusto. At that moment, we felt so happy that our efforts had paid off. He always ate our fruit and said, "It's delicious, because you and Dad grew it." Hearing these words, we began to take even more pride in our work. We were determined to continue growing delicious fruit without compromise. For Donald, who looked forward to our fruits, and for the consumers, who enjoyed them at supermarkets or schools. Having our fruit of effort stolen made both Daniel and me angry, of course. However, Donald was in 9th grade, a crucial time in his life. "Thank you, but you're also a student preparing for exams, so you can't be on 24-hour surveillance duty. Instead, your father and I will keep a close watch," I said, and Daniel nodded in agreement. And so, Daniel and I took turns monitoring our fruit orchard morning and night. Muscat grapes were the clear target, as they were in high demand worldwide for their softness, edible skin, and juicy flesh. That might have been one reason, but the fact that the Muscat grape vines were located along the road might have been another reason. We thought that if a thief were to come again, they would steal something along the road since it would be easier, so we kept an eye there day and night. We kept a close watch for a week, but no Muscat grapes were stolen during that time. In the end, no one who seemed to be the culprit showed up due to our intense vigilance, so we never found out who did it, but we were satisfied with the result because the theft was stopped. "They must have given up because you guys were vigilant. Your determination scared the thief away." Seeing Donald's happy expression, Daniel and I couldn't help but smile. However, to be honest, the past week has been really hard. Even though we took turns, we had to stay up late at night for surveillance after working all day. Our bodies were exhausted, and we were sleep deprived, and that was very risky for fruit farmers who often worked at height. We thought we could finally sleep peacefully with the theft stopped, but just a few days after we stopped the surveillance, our crops were stolen again. "Come here, Daniel. Look at this." I went to the orchard early in the morning and was left speechless by what I saw. Muscat grapes were missing in large quantities from the vines along the road. These Muscat grapes were supposed to be harvested today, and the damage was extensive, costing us several few $1,000s. We were so shocked that we returned home dejected and at a loss for words. But Donald was different. His eyes were burning with anger. "We can't just let this slide, not this time. The thief needs to face consequences, and we need to fight back." Donald himself must have been shocked to see us completely devastated, but he cheerfully encouraged us. Seeing his determination ignited our fighting spirit. We couldn't just let things continue as they were. "You are right. There's no use in being downcast," I said, and we decided to install security cameras. If the thief comes again, we would be able to identify them this time. But it seemed that Donald was not satisfied with just that. "Having cameras might deter future thefts, but we can't make the thief reflect on the past crimes with it. I can't let the thief get away with it. They made you both sad, and the thief needs to pay for it," he said angrily. "I've been thinking about it, but why don't we replace all the Muscat grapes along the road with white wine grapes? I think if the thief takes those, they'll regret it." Donald showed us pictures of white grapes on his smartphone. We had seen them at fruit fairs. They are great for making wine, but not so great for just eating. In other words, they are the grapes that don't taste good. It looks much smaller than Muscat, and its shape looks like a bell. "What are we going to do with these? They clearly aren't Muscat grapes, and it will be obvious." I could not understand Donald's thoughts and my head was filled with questions. He replied, "Well, grapes are grapes, right? At night, you won't be able to tell the difference. Besides, the thief will be in a rush, so they won't notice. They'll only realize it when the sun rises." His explanation left Daniel and me even more bewildered. Replacing the Muscat grapes along the road with white grapes seemed to be his plan, but we couldn't understand how that would punish the thief. Certainly, they would regret it when they eat them. In that sense, the thief might have a bad experience, but it's hard to see how such a thing could do much damage. Donald's idea was somewhat childish, and Daniel didn't seem convinced either. Seeing our confusion, Donald grinned mischievously. "What kind of person do you guys think the thief might be?" he suddenly asked, and Daniel and I exchanged glances. "What kind of person? I don't imagine young people stealing fruit like this. Maybe elderly people? Someone who's somewhat older?" Daniel said. "Dad, you don't get it. The thief isn't an old person. Even if it were, they would only steal enough for themselves. The thief took all the Muscat grapes along the road, and it is clearly not the amount that one can eat alone." Donald replied proudly, looking like a young detective. "My friend told me that a thief took their fruit as well, just like they did to us." "What? Really?" I was surprised because I hadn't heard about it. "I'm not lying. I think the way their thief did is somehow similar to the way our thief did it. He said that his thief also took the ones along the road," Donald explained. While we couldn't quite grasp what Donald wanted to say, he continued, "Hey, have you guys ever heard of dropshipping?" "Dropshipping?" I had no idea what it was. "Yeah. You know, there are people selling fruits and perishables on online shopping site." Indeed, I sometimes use those sites and have occasionally seen plants and vegetables for sale at unbeatable prices. I would never buy such a product because it did not say where it came from and the seller was anonymous, but surprisingly they were often sold out. I heard that some sellers don't actually have the item in stock. Of course, that's not always the case. But some bad guys would steal a little at first, taste it, and if it tastes good, they would list many of the fruits and vegetables online at once. And the buyers who don't know anything about it will buy it, right? Once the seller finds out how many were sold, then the seller goes and steals that many. I was amazed. There are people out there using such cunning tactics? In a typical resale scenario, the seller bears the risk of holding inventory. But if the seller intends to steal, then there's no risk of holding inventory. After all, if you sell 1 kilogram of grapes on the site, you just steal 1 kilogram of grapes. I finally grasped what Donald was getting at. "So, are you saying the thief knows our Muscat grapes are delicious and is listing them on some website with the intention of stealing from us again?" Donald's eyes sparkled as he nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. I don't think they'll come back to steal again anytime soon because they've just stolen a lot of grapes. So in the meantime, let's switch to totally different, less tasty grapes." Daniel seemed to understand this clever trap a little after I did. "I'm sure that anyone who would take such a large amount of grapes would be doing that for money. When the thief comes back to steal the grapes after selling a lot of them on the website, and find out that all the grapes have been switched to a different kind, I'm sure that they will panic. Let's teach them a lesson so they will never do it again." Donald's passionate speech surprised both Daniel and me. Daniel became eager to execute this plan. From that day on, we put our plan into action. We only replanted the grapevines along the road that had been frequently stolen, and we paid meticulous attention not to ship white grapes by mistake. We really wanted to teach the thief a lesson, so the whole family worked together. We couldn't forgive the thief who took the grapes that we had worked so hard to grow, without taking any risks. While the thief might be doing this without much thoughts, for us, this is our purpose of life. Ever since the day Donald overcame his aversion to fruits, Friot became like our second child. There is no parent who could live happily when their child was kidnapped. We eventually finished planting the new grapevines along the road. Considering that the thief might live nearby, we were extremely cautious during the process. Even though they were entirely different grapes to us as experts, surprisingly they looked similar from a distance. Especially if the thief comes at night, they wouldn't be able to notice the difference at all. Then, one day, Paul and his wife visited us for the first time in a long time. They inquired, "We've heard about a thief who stole the fruits from my friend's farm nearby. Are you guys okay?" Upon hearing this, I replied, The thief has stolen our fruits a few times, too. Then Paul became very upset. That's terrible. Having such incidents happening nearby is alarming. I'm going to recruit volunteers from our condo for patrols. His words were reassuring, and it felt good to know we had more allies. While we had contacted the police, it seemed they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. The cooperation of our neighbors was much appreciated. Then, Paul's wife made a suggestion. I will create shifts and manage the patrol team with my son. Her son was apparently in his 30s and single. He had taken leave from work due to health issues and was staying at home. I had seen him once before, and he is a very tall man. I expressed my gratitude to her for her willingness to help. It's funny to say that we were looking forward to seeing the thief, but we were ready. And that night, the situation we had expected actually happened. When I woke up in the morning, Donald came running from the orchard. They came again. Everything is gone, he exclaimed. There was no patrol in the neighborhood the previous night. I wondered how the thief knew about it. With these thoughts in mind, I hurried to the orchard. Sure enough, the white grapes along the road were gone. That was exactly what we wanted. The sales on the website must have been booming, as almost all the white grapes were taken. Let's check the cameras. Maybe we can see the thief, Daniel said, and we decided to check the camera. We had kept the presence of the cameras a secret from the patrol team just to be cautious. We examined the footage, and there it was, a tall man taking instructions from a smaller, presumably female figure, loading the white grapes into a car. That person! I was shocked and covered my mouth with my hand. Daniel, too, had a stern expression after watching the footage. The next night, we decided to pay a visit to the thief's house. We took a voice recorder just in case. When we rang the doorbell, Paul answered the door. Oh, Patricia. What brought you here? We were taken aback when we saw their foyer. There was a mountain of white grapes piled up there, white grapes that had been planted in our orchard. I pointed to them and said, Paul, where did you get those grapes? Oh, these? My wife said she got them from an acquaintance, but when we tried them, they were terrible. We don't know what to do with them, he explained. Upon hearing his response, Daniel and I exchanged glances. It seemed that he had no knowledge of what was happening. Daniel and I nodded at each other and said to him, Paul, these grapes belong to us. Sorry? He was surprised by our statement. We switched our Muscat grapes with white grapes as measures for a thief. We were surprised when we saw the security camera footage, which showed your wife and son. Paul was speechless, his eyes darting around in disbelief. Hazel, you have been selling our Muscat grapes, haven't you? Daniel asked. With your knowledge of the neighborhood patrol schedules, you knew the perfect time to steal. When I said it, her eyes were wandering. From her reaction, it seemed that Donald was right about it. Wait, you guys are the thieves in this neighborhood? Paul shouted. Then she became defiant. What's wrong with you guys playing the stupid trick on us? What's the big deal? It's just a few grapes. Our son is too sick to work, so it's a way for him to earn a little money, she argued. I was furious at her audacious statement. What are you talking about? Your son is too sick to work, you say? Then how on earth can he steal from us? That's absurd. Those are the fruits we worked hard to cultivate. You can't just steal them so casually. Perhaps I had intimidated her with my rage, and she for some reason started blaming her own husband. This is all your fault. You let that boy quit his job to become the head of some union, and it doesn't even pay a penny. It appeared that Hazel had been spoiling her unemployed son and was making money through theft alongside her son, who was knowledgeable about the internet. Such behavior was inexcusable. Hazel kept confessing everything. This is a proper theft crime. And there's evidence from the security camera. You should talk to the police, I told her. Please, don't report this. What will happen to my son if he gets caught? She cried and pleaded, but there was no way I would let them off the hook. Paul finally spoke up. Go ahead, Patricia. Please report them to the police. All right. Thank you, Daniel said, and Hazel started begging for forgiveness. But we couldn't care less. I warned her, be prepared to be pursued not only for our case but also for the other crimes you've committed. With that, we left their place. Afterward, Hazel and her son were arrested based on the evidence and their confession. This incident led to the collapse of their family. Paul moved out of the condo after he got divorced. Even if she were released, it was unlikely they could live together after both mother and child had committed a theft. As expected, they faced more charges, and I don't know what they will do with their lives in the future. They have to pay for their crimes. I could not believe that she could spoil a child and commit such foolish crimes. See, didn't I tell you? Donald said with a proud face. You were right. The mother and son really did something stupid, I agreed. There are no shortcuts in life. You cannot, and should not even think of obtaining something that someone has worked so hard to cultivate and nurture with no effort. We were grateful to Donald and made up our minds to continue facing our work with diligence and integrity.